Our scripture is from 1 Peter 3, verses 8 through 22. Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Who is going to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened. But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed for their slander. For it is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the righteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. After being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirits, to those who were disobedient long ago, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, only a few people, 8 in all, were saved through water. And this water symbolizes baptism that now saves you also. Not the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a clear conscience toward God. It saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at God's right hand, with angels, authorities, and powers in submission to him.
There's a lot there for us this morning. And we only have time to focus on the first portion of that, so we're going to get out of here on time, I promise. I have to, I don't have a choice. In all that I preach about from up here, the most difficult thing that I have to practice myself is is patience and perseverance. Anybody else have a problem with patience and perseverance? I'm so glad I'm not alone. It is so hard to be patient and to persevere through difficult times, isn't it? I think when it comes down to it, one possible thing that might keep us all from being happy, really happy, is our inability to practice patience and perseverance. I know that, personally speaking, I'm always looking for the next thing. And by doing that, it creates a false sense of urgency that doesn't really exist. Here's something silly, but why can't Pokemon Go players put their phones and tablets down for a few minutes? You know why? The motto is not to catch some. The motto is gotta catch them all, right? You can't put your phone down until you catch them all. And then once it turns out, catch them all, there's now these new ones that they keep adding in. So you're never going to be done. And I realize for people over a certain age, this is all very baffling. What's the big deal anyway? Well, the big deal is this. It points to this fact that the mass market culture of consumption that we have in our world has created this false idea that we're only ever one step away from satisfaction. And if we can get satisfaction, maybe we can find happiness, right? Desires, however, are not meant to be quenched in this way. And our desires quickly move on to the next thing, don't they? Always. How about this? Here's another trend that kind of points to this idea. How about binge watching television shows? Anybody do that? Binge watch? Okay, come on. I do. Because you want to go on to the next one. Why wait for one episode per week when you can watch all 13 episodes in 13 hours straight, right? Anybody, come on, admit it, anybody ever do that? Just stay up and just watch 13 episodes in a row?
One show I really follow is already gone past 800. So.
I mean, Netflix has perfected this, you know? You can just sit down, you can watch the whole season of House of Cards or Orange is the New Black or whatever. We may not actually retain much from watching 13 hours straight of television, but at least we can sit down and tell our friends, yeah, I saw that too. And then you can just move on to the very next thing, whatever it happens to be. Right now, I'm watching Stranger Things. That's a pretty good show. It's kind of fun. Anyway, what you desire today, if you obtain it, is not what you will desire tomorrow. That's kind of the bottom line here. It's how our brains are wired. And it's how social science has teamed up with modern commerce and entertainment to keep us chasing through the rat race toward that elusive piece of cheese. How can we escape the cycle? Maybe we could practice some patience and perseverance. And when we do that on a bigger scale, not just as individuals, it's hard to do that as kind of standing alone and be patient. But if you have a whole group of people with you that can help you to be patient and to persevere, that's where the church becomes a community that it becomes a teaching community. We teach one another together this practice of patience and perseverance. Peter explains what this looks like in our passage this morning in the community of believers called the church. Take a look with me starting in verse 8. He writes this, "Finally, all of you be like-minded. Be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil." In our series from 1 Peter this summer, we've been talking about who we are and what kind of people we should be as Christians. And Peter begins with some advice to the community of believers. Christianity is not a short-term decision. It's not a one-of kind of decision. Like you sit down and you say, one day I'm going to be a Christian, and then that's it. It's a series of choices, day after day, that eventually builds us into the image of Christ. For Peter, we're either working ourselves into the image of Christ, or we're moving away from the image of Christ. It's about the intentions of our daily lives. Just think about your schedule. Most of us, when we wake up in the morning, we don't really think about our intentions for the day. If we would find probably more meaning and more purpose to our lives. Instead, here's what I find. When I get up in the morning, I simply respond to the noise and the clutter around me that hits me through the course of the day. For instance, first thing that wakes me up is the alarm clock, noise. Then I get in the car and I listen to some morning news, get frustrated by that. Maybe I get stuck in traffic. Maybe we let the boss bother us. We let financial worries creep in just when we have a quiet moment to ourselves. Then we get home and our kids have needs. They need us. And then we need to find dinner. And then we need to get their kids their evening activities. And then when we finally have them in bed, we sit down at the TV for a few minutes and we flick to the channels and realize that we're too tired for anything, so that we fall into bed exhausted. But we can't fall asleep because there are so many things on our minds that we didn't get done for that day. No wonder we're unhappy. Modern life, as we've inflicted on ourselves, doesn't lend itself to a whole lot of meaning on a daily basis. We need to practice patience and perseverance and slow things down so that we can realize what's actually going on and get a grip. The Christians of the first century faced awful circumstances. The people that Peter is writing to were in a tough place. They were people of low position. They were people that placed their lives at risk because of their faith in Jesus. It's kind of unfathomable for us to think that you could be arrested and put in jail or executed just for believing something, but that's the world that they lived in. They lived in a threatening world that didn't like them very much. But I imagine that they were happier than we were. Peter's instructions help us to understand where their happiness might come from. They had this great community to belong to. And verses 8 through 12 really highlight the kind of community they had. Their values included their like-mindedness, their sympathy for one another, their love for each other, their humility and compassion. If someone were to mess up within the community, they didn't respond with retribution. They responded with grace. And so I imagine that these first Christians also spent a great deal of time together. When work was finished, they went to find out where their church was meeting. They didn't have a building. It was illegal for Christians to gather together, so they kind of got together wherever they could, in somebody's house or maybe in a cave after a while. They ate together, and the church was really like a big family. It's that rhythm of getting together daily, intentionally, that helped them to endure persecution in their low status. And I think if we really want to discover the recipe that these early Christians had for patience and for enduring, it requires us to intentionally get together more to find it. Because community transcends awful situations. When you have a community that stands with you, you can face anything. When we have someone to walk through life with us, circumstances still might be terrible, but now we have someone who will share the burden with us, and we do the same for them. Church for most people is what? Maybe 1-2 hours on Sunday? It's not a community. We barely know each other's first names. That's not Peter's image of the church. And doing church that way doesn't help us to form a strong, supportive community that we need. How can we care for each other? We can care for each other by turning down the noise, by reducing the clutter in our lives, by removing that joyless routine that I was talking about, and exchanging it for a joyful community. If we stop doing the things that kill our souls, you know what they are, we can all think of them pretty easily. We have time for the things that build our spirits up. Sign me up for that. I think if we were to create a joyful community in the midst of Niagara Falls, or in the midst of Lewiston, or Sanborn, or wherever we live, it would be something that turned people's hearts to Christ. And isn't that the goal, to have people experience what we experience? Joyful people gathered together turn people to Christ. It's easy for people to ignore the church because sometimes the church doesn't seem to offer anything different from what they can get in other places in the world. You know, the people that I know that don't go to church, they get their community from the gym or from their running club, or they go out to the bar and they get their community there. They get their worship experiences from concerts and from sports. Now these things are maybe not things that we would think of as community, but in a lot of ways they at least emotionally fulfill the same kind of thing that church used to do. They're not perfect, but they fill an emotional need. We have a more excellent way. A family, a multi-generational family, a supportive community that helps us to persevere, that encourages us to grow deeper with God. But it's only excellent if we ourselves practice that community and we practice that joyful worship. If people don't see who we are and what we're about when they come in the first few times, they won't stay around. And why would they when they can find their emotional needs met elsewhere? It's not really about emotional needs, but yet We all need to find our place somewhere before we can get to fulfilling our spiritual needs. I started by asking this question last week. Would our community feel a sense of loss if we didn't exist starting tomorrow? Would our community mourn, or would they even notice if we were gone? Are we valuable to our community? Because our church has the opportunity to be a beacon, a shining exemplary light of God's idea of community and how good that community can be. Now, why aren't people patient anymore? Why do we struggle with perseverance? Because we no longer have good communities to support us. The church needs to be at the very forefront of helping people to recover patience and perseverance. You know, think about the old church standbys that many of you remember. Church potlucks, church camp, men's breakfast, revivals, sports leagues. These things were done because we loved to get together. We liked a little competition, but we loved getting together, and we liked helping people grow in their faith. Some time ago, it seemed like the faith part kind of went away from a lot of church activities. It was just something to do to get together. And pretty soon, it only took a generation, these things stopped almost completely. And then once those things stopped, people kind of got busy and they forgot about going to church at all. So where do we start? Well, to start, I think I've said this all along since I've started preaching here just over a year ago. To rebuild any community to what it was and to build it beyond what it was, we start with Christ. We start, I think, with a meal. A meal is a perfect place to gather a family together. And I think that communion is a great place to start. The sacrament of communion is a visible act that helps us to understand who we are and what we're about. Because if you listen to that liturgy, we tell our story about what church is all about, who Christ is, how God relates to us. We eat and we drink something. We physically move around. We move toward Christ, receive, and then move out into the world. I don't know if you have even thought about all the symbolism that happens in the sacrament of communion. But once we do, we continue to build out this community by gathering with intentionality. Yesterday we gathered to make bread, and we've got some loaves. You can see them over on these two tables here. We don't have enough for everybody to take, but if you know somebody that could really use just some kindness, or you're looking for a way to say, I'm praying for you, but you're a little shy, maybe just take a loaf of bread and give them a loaf of bread, and just use that as an opportunity to share some kindness or share a prayer with them. It might be a real powerful way that you can just be a friend to somebody. So take a loaf of bread if you want to give that away to somebody today. And I'd encourage you to come out and make bread with us on the first and third Sundays of the month. It's Saturdays of the month. It's a great way to make something for somebody else. Intentionality is what it takes. That's the other ingredient. And intentionality is what we're going to be talking about next Sunday. What are our intentions for each day? Do we get up and we think about what we're going to do for the day, or maybe our motivations and how that relates to our faith and our walk with God? If we want to experience the power of what Peter is talking about here in verses 8 through 12, the kind of community that can carry us through anything at all, then these are the things that we need to do. We need to do more of. Then we can grow in patience and perseverance and in the Spirit of Christ together as we support one another in this journey called Christianity.